Wonderful. I'm very excited to be here. And thank you everyone for joining. So, my name is Alicia Winding. I am founder of Amplified Motion Group. And in today's session, we will be talking about making go-to-market practical. So, not as a buzzword, but as the operating layer that helps growing businesses connect to what they do and how buyers understand it and how revenue actually moves. So a quick housekeeping note before we get into it. Please stay muted unless you're speaking. We'll be using Canva Live for questions and the interactive portion of the workshop. So feel free to get to know each other in the chat and feel free to connect through there. Once we get to the interactive portion, I'll share the Canva Live link in the chat. And feel free to submit your responses either with your name or anonymously, and I can project them so everyone can benefit from the discussion and the answers. So the wonderful about me slide. I wanted to give a quick context on where I'm coming from before we get into the full content of the workshop, because my background shapes the lens I'm bringing to you today. I have about 17 years across advertising, media, ad tech, sales, and partnerships. And the through line across all of those years and all of those experiences has truly been the same. I've sat in rooms where deals have stalled, where positioning doesn't necessarily land, where founders and sales teams are doing live translations on every single call because the story hasn't been designed to do that specific work just yet. So this is where my interest in go-to-market comes from. It's not theory, it's not necessarily frameworks for the sake of just being a framework, but it's what actually moves buyers and what gets in the way. That experience is what Amplified Motion Group is built on, and I'll go ahead and show you what I mean here in this next slide. So Amplified Motion Group, that's the company that I own. And it exists to help founders close the gap between the value they've already created and what the market understands and buys. We're a strategic consultancy. We're not a sales agency or a marketing shop. And our work sits upstream of more activity. Before you add additional headcount, budget, or channels, we help you get clear on what you're actually saying and who you're saying it to, and the revenue motion that needs work at the particular stage that you're in. The output ends up being more than just strategy language. It's a set of decisions and frameworks and usable assets that help to make growth more coherent and easier to execute and more consistent. If anything in this session today sounds like work you need help doing, that's exactly what we're built for. And I have a contact page towards the end of the presentation. But now let's get into it. So as we move towards this agenda here, I want to be transparent about where we're going and what I'm going to be promising you today. We're going to define GTM in a way that's actually usable as the operating system behind whether your growth moves. So we're not just doing a strategy exercise or a launch checklist. We're going to look at what the system typically breaks down or where the system typically breaks down and why it's harder to see than you actually think. You're going to run a quick diagnostic on your own business in the middle of the session, and we'll use our Canva Live to interact. And we'll talk about sequencing because it's not just about knowing what to fix, it's also about knowing what needs to happen first. It's very important. And my goal is by the end of the time that we spend together, once we get to the Q&A, you can look at your own GTM motion and know exactly where to put your attention next. So this is where I'd like to start. We can take a look at this list here and see if any of these things sound familiar in regards to your business. And these are things you've probably already felt. And so they're the most common things I hear from founders and growth operators. And the instinct here is to push harder especially if you see that people are interested but not converting, right? You want to figure it out by doing more of the same. More outreach, more content, and more experiments. But activity on top of a misaligned go-to-market motion really just creates more noise. So that's what today is about, identifying where that particular friction actually is. So before we get into the framework, I wanted to be clear about the lens that I'm using, especially since the term go-to-market has been generally pretty broad. A lot of thinking around GTM is built from the inside out. So it's here's our offer, here's our market, here's our message. But I work from the inside outside in. And each one of these four beliefs came from watching what happens in actual sales conversations. So what does the buyer actually experience? Where does the story break down in real conversation? Because these things happen in real life. It happens in presentations and over decks and all of that, but not as often as it does in rooms or calls. Where does that momentum stall between interest and decision? Where's the revenue focus? And this is what I have shifted into the sales informed lens. It means that positioning isn't just the message that you craft, it's something that holds up when a skeptical buyer pushes back. And it's important to note that narrative specifically, it's not just polish, it's actually friction reduction. And GTM isn't just a strategy on paper, it shows up in pipeline movement. And so that's the standard that we're working towards today. So what does this actually look like in practice? Go to market isn't something you do to the market. It's actually what the buyer experiences at every stage. So I'll say that again. Go to market, GTM, isn't something that you do to the market. It's what the buyer experiences at every stage. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So as I mentioned in the last slide, most GTM definitions are built from the inside out. It's what the company does, what it offers, how it goes to market. That may be valid for them, but let's shift that perspective to GTM as what the buyer experiences. So this slide is one of the most important in the deck, and feel free to take a screenshot. I'll follow up with it as a resource. Towards the end of this call, there's a link to it. But this is something that you may want to refer to in the future. So each one of these five elements is a question your business is answering for the buyer, whether you've designed for it or not. The offer clarity, audience fit, positioning, buyer journey, and the revenue motion. Now, the question is whether the answers are actually working. When the offer clarity is weak, your buyer can't quickly grasp what matters to them. When the positioning doesn't land, then you're explaining instead of selling. So when the journey is undefined, the buyer journey is undefined, then deals stall for seemingly no obvious reason. The sales informed lens works this way because conversation is actually where you find out which one of these is actually broken. So that's what we're going to go into next. This is a pattern that I see most consistently. Growth actually doesn't stall because the product got worse or something like that. It stalls because the system connecting the offer to the buyer stopped working or it wasn't actually designed. So I know these friction points because I see them show up in pipeline, and it's evident in what buyers say and then also what they don't say and where specifically those deals stall. So the buyer feels it is confusion, inconsistency, or lack of urgency. The company feels it is stalled deals, soft conversion, or a message that lands differently in every conversation. And what that looks like is a sales problem or a demand problem, but it actually is almost always a GTM clarity problem. And the good news here is it's diagnosable. And so that's what we're going to do next. We're going to get interactive, guys. So I have a simple GTM here. This is another slide you may want to screenshot. So these four questions came directly from the patterns I see in pipeline. These are moments where buyers disengage, where deals go quiet, where conversion softens. And so I reverse engineered them from what I observe from real buying situations, not just from theory. And notice the frame on these questions. They're written from the buyer's perspective, not the company's perspective, and that is intentional. Go to market doesn't break in your internal planning because that is actually pretty difficult to see. It breaks in the buyer's experience of you. So the diagnosis has to start there. And I'll pause on this slide for a moment after I start talking or stop talking. Um, Please take a few seconds with each question. Be honest, you don't have to share, but there will be an opportunity to do so in the next slide. You can do so anonymously or with your name or what have you. But notice where you hesitate on each one of these questions, because wherever you do hesitate, that's probably where the buyer is hesitating as well. So now it's your turn. I'll give you a couple of minutes. I've actually opened up Canva Live. Let me go ahead and share this with you. It's an opportunity to get interactive. So, which one of those four questions in the last slide did you say no to? And let's actually add this here to the chat. Okay. In the chat, you'll find a Canva link, and you can click into it for Canva Live, and feel free to share your responses. I'll actually go back to that last slide so you guys can see the questions again, or the simple diagnostic again. Feel free to interact. Well, I see a couple of people have entered the live, and once you give your responses, then I will project them. Again, you can do it anonymously or you can use your name. So I'm seeing number two. Are the people we're reaching the ones who've already feel the problem that we solve, or are we convincing people they have a problem they haven't named yet? So number two. Thank you, Christina, for sharing that. Anyone else want to interact? Thank you, Nitin. Number one. So when a buyer first encounters us, they can, or can they immediately tell what this is and why it matters to them without us explaining? So let me move forward and I will actually leave the Canva Live open and we'll use that for Q&A a little bit later in the presentation. But let's see here. So the sequence actually matters, and most teams try to fix everything at once. but end up improving nothing. So more kind of context around each one of those four constraints. The reason the sequence is ordered this way is because each level uh, feeds into the next level. So if you have a positioning issue, that feeds into your ICP focus, or if you have a narrative issue, then your revenue motion is going to be impacted. So it kind of compounds. If the ICP is too broad, improving your revenue motion is just going to feel like you're running a better process with the wrong people. So you can start with the constraint that the buyer is hitting first because that's closest to the revenue. And once you clear that, then the next level becomes the new constraint. And that's how you build momentum without spinning. I want to unmute here and see if anyone has any questions on this slide. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute for this one. I want to make sure that it's clear. Okay. So this is what alignment actually looks like. Oh, Ellen, I see Ellen. Feel free to unmute. I see Ellen has her hand up. No, she can't unmute. Okay. Okay, not a problem. We'll move on to the next slide. So this is what alignment actually looks like. This is a composite that I built from a pattern that I see consistently enough that I can map it pretty precisely. It's a B2B SaaS company with workflow or ops adjacent product. It's in Series A, somewhere around 1 to 2 million ARR. Doing a lot of the right looking activity, but growth is actually plateaued. Now, I know that people who've joined this call are at varying stages of their founder journey, but it still does apply. The overarching concept of this still does apply. Um, so what I want to draw your attention to here is how the before and the after are framed. So not what the company actually changed internally, but what the buyer experienced differently because of the GTM. And that's the actual measure here. So before, the buyer couldn't tell who this is really built for, who this particular product was really built for. They heard different things depending on who they talked to, whether that was the founder, the marketing person, the salesperson. It was slightly different. It was not a consistent narrative. So they left demos interested, but they didn't have a particular reason to act. The content that they found didn't meet them where they were in the actual decision process that they were in for their business. None of this is actually a product problem, and it's not even a demand problem either. It's a clarity around go-to-market strategy, and the buyer felt every moment of it. So what shifted here wasn't the actual offer. They didn't go back and rebuild the product. They didn't hire a bigger sales team. They got clear on who the product was actually for, unified the story across every function and channel, identified what genuinely created the urgency in conversation, and mapped content to where the buyers actually were in the decision-making process. So the buyer just started recognizing themselves, and the story held up. Ultimately, the momentum flowed, and that's what go-to-market alignment actually changes. Not the internal operations, it's what the buyer walks away experiencing so that there can be a clear path to sale that is more predictable and more consistent for the company or for your company. So before we close, I want to give you about a moment to sit with this. So we're not going to do this in Canva Live this time. This is just for yourself. Looking at those three questions here on the slide. So the first one connects you to the composite that we just walked through and back to your own situation. The second one asks you to name your constraint using the sequence that we covered, not a vague sense that something's off, but a specific label. And the third one is a practical test. If you fix that constraint, what would you actually change in a real conversation with a buyer next week? That's the level of specificity I'd like for you to leave with, not necessarily just a framework on a slide, but a decision you can make for yourself this week for your business. So I have some key takeaways here that I'd like to get into. Everything we covered today comes back to one idea, and that's that GTM is what the buyer experiences. It's not what you plan, it's not what you execute. Um, it's what lands on either side, on the other side. When that system is working, positioning is clear, conversations are consistent, and that momentum builds. But when it's not, you feel it in friction that you can't always name. The diagnostic that I shared earlier gives you a way to see it, and the sequence gives you a way to fix it in the right order. The example shows what changes come into effect when you actually do. And next we'll move into Q&A, and I'd like to hear, again, you can do this anonymously, or you can use your name. I'd love to hear more about the friction that your buyers are hearing right or experiencing right now. Also, any other general questions that I can answer for you. That Canva Live is open, and it's still here in the chat.
Hi, I'm able to unmute now if that's all right for me to ask now.
Yes. Yes, that's Ellen. Yes, feel
Yes,
free.
hi, thanks.
Hi.
Yeah, I just had a question for you about the initial part about do they know why it's for them without explaining? I might be overcomplicating it, but I'm like if I'm verbally communicating what it is, like is this more about like where are they first experiencing the offer or the value proposition? And how is that different than explaining, I guess?
So you mean uh are your buyers not understanding what you do, or can you clarify that question again?
Yes, sorry. I feel like I'm getting a little abstract, but um like what is the first point of contact if it doesn't involve explaining what the problem is and why it's relevant to them? I guess for me, I do consulting, and so most of it um like I don't have a physical product. I just sort of like I feel like all I do is explain
Mm-hmm.
or like speak. So what is it like if I'm not explaining what is the difference, I guess, if you're verbally communicating what it is that you do and what you offer?
Okay, so actually, I had this slide up. I'm going to move to this one here. So, since this is in a sequence, it sounds like you have an offer. Is your offer generally clear? Because what I'm hearing from you that it sounds like more of an ICP focus. Are you focusing on the right people?
I think right now I'm actually sort of doing product market fit. I'm transitioning from previously I was working with more like large scale companies. And now I know that I work with somewhat later stages, but I also sort of want to spend time exploring.
Hmm.
So it for me it's sort of still an active testing process.
Okay. Okay. It sounds like once you get that clear, I think the offer will make more sense. Actually, here looking at the positioning, if the value is unclear to buyers, then then that's going to lead you to over explain on every call. So maybe going back and simplifying the actual offer and the actual process. I would start from bare bones. What is it? And simplify it. So, and then from there, kind of build on the details of it. Does that help answer your question, or is there anything else I can share there?
That does help. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. You're welcome. Let's see. I see some questions in the live. Thank you guys for participating here. Let's see. So this one came through when we did our diagnostic check. Pricing is difficult in B2B businesses. It's often to end up setting the price too low. So happy to discuss this specifically since this one is a little bit outside of the go-to-market strategy conversation for this particular workshop. But feel free to reach out to me and contact me, and I'll be happy to have this conversation with you. I'm going to share my contact information toward the end of this call. So another person said, if the current product is not accepted by the market, should I keep pivoting until I succeed? I would love to provide a little bit more, or if you could provide a little bit more information in terms of if the product is not accepted by the market. And I'd love to understand why, or maybe it is a narrative issue. Maybe people just don't understand. Um, but if you would like to stay anonymous, feel free to contact me. Happy to have that conversation. But if you would like to share, feel free to unmute in the next couple of seconds. I'd be happy to have more of a dialogue here to try to figure this out because you shouldn't have to necessarily keep pivoting. It may just be a narrative problem or even that positioning problem. So it depends on what's actually happening there. Moving on here. Thank you, Nitin. The four-question GTM framework is great. Thank you for sharing. What are some means or tools to get answers from our customers? As an enterprise, we could possibly guess, is there a structured framework or methodology for getting concrete answers? So I would say it depends on what your business is. However, I would sit down and fact find because the initial early calls, you're going to want to do discovery to ensure that there is a fit between, especially if this is an enterprise product, there's a fit between what you offer, your solution, and their particular problem and their objectives. So you're really going to want to get them talking more than you're actually talking. And you're going to want to figure out the questions that ultimately lead them down the road that this makes sense for them. So you shouldn't necessarily have to sell it into them, um, but you should be able to position it so that it makes sense. This is a solution that you have that solves a problem that they have. So it only makes sense for them to work with you. Now, happy to continue the conversation it's in. Feel free to contact me for specifics, but I hope that gave you enough of a general framework. And feel free to unmute if you'd like to discuss this further here, if you want to add in a little bit more context, and then I can help to further answer your question. Otherwise, feel free to go ahead and uh, follow up via contact.
Yeah, sure. I think this is helpful. I mean, I work with social impact in the social impact space, so social entrepreneurships, and these are very small businesses in rural areas. So they have this GTM problem. I mean, I have a few enterprises where they said the customers showed interest, but there is no traction. The same questions you brought up in the slides. So yeah, I think that's helpful. I think you're saying that we should hear more from our customers than talk.
Yeah, yeah. There are particular questions that you can form. Really, the thing is, you want to get an understanding of what their objectives are, what their issues are, what their pain points are, and position that so that your business can be the solution. So again,
Okay.
it's more the more you can get them talking about things that kind of make sense to your business, the more you're building a story that makes it evident that they should work with you. I hope that's clear.
I see. And what could be some frameworks or some platforms you can do that? Is it like cold calling a customers or any hints?
Well, I wouldn't say cold calling because cold calling is basically calling and asking,
Right.
yeah, right.
Right.
So, I would sit down based on what your ICP is and what their general issues tend to be, what their general pain points tend to be. You're
Mhm.
going to want to find out what their objectives are, if it's social impact, if they have a particular campaign, or if they have a particular initiative that they're focused on. I would want to find out more about that particular interest
Okay.
and what's going on there. So I would kind of reverse engineer what you do and then find out what their pain points are to kind of plug the hole with what you have. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you want some more kind of guidance around there, I'm going to share my contact in a couple of slides, and feel free to book a 15-minute call, and we can discuss what's going on there, and I can help you with those general frameworks.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's see. Would you advise if the buyer recognizes the need but not have, oh, what would you advise if the buyer recognizes the need but does not have urgency to buy now? So this one is pretty common. And thank you, Christina, for reaching out with this one. I'm actually going to pull this up here because that is in our don't fix everything with once slide. So let's see here. Um, so if there's no urgency, I would focus on the revenue motion. So there, also coming back here, just I'm bringing all of this up so that you can see all of this at the same time, right? So if there's a clear, it doesn't sound like there is a clear, repeatable way that the deals actually close. It sounds like there's interest, but it continues to drop off. So with that, you can focus on the particular narrative around how you're positioning it. That can help. But also, feel free to reach out to me, Christina. I would be happy to help you there with the details. Because I know I've worked with you before and happy to provide some specific insight there. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so I will leave that Canva Live session open for just a moment, and if anything else comes through, then I'll read through those questions. But today, I was able to share the what and the where. So this workshop was designed to help you see your GTM more clearly and define where that friction lives and what the buyer is experiencing at each stage. And then also what constraint deserves the attention first. So that's the what and the where. But what I didn't cover is the how. And that question is, how do you actually redesign the positioning so it lands without explanation? And Christina, that is part of your answer there. How do you tighten ICP focus so the right buyers are recognizing themselves immediately? How do you build that narrative so your whole team can run consistently? That's the actual work, and that's the work that Amplified Motion Group is built to do. If today surfaced something that you recognize in your own business, one of those constraints that I mentioned, and that now actually has a name, especially since they're also now validated by the actions that the buyer is taking, then I'd be happy to help you build that fix. So not so that you don't just see it, and we can work together to fix it, and I can build it for you. The three ways to move forward here are on the screen. The book and intro call, you can reach out directly via email, or you can learn more at my website. I've also included a link to the presentation on a portion of Amplified Motion Group site. So I created a separate site for this, or a separate page for this. that you can refer to this deck. And clarity really is the product here. So if you're ready to build and ready to move forward, feel free to reach out.